Now, Mafia 2 is a third-person shooter slash action-adventure game, and is out for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Windows PC. The story of Mafia 2 is like any other traditional mob story. If you've seen any of the Godfather movies, Mafia 2 will seem quite familiar. So basically, you play as this guy named Vito Scaletta, an Italian-American born in Sicily and came to Empire Bay with his family searching for a better life. It's not until Vito is about 20 years old that him and his longtime friend Joe decide to rob a store. Of course, Vito gets caught and is then sent to the military. A few years later, Vito comes home after an injury and sees that Empire Bay is not as it used to be, and his friend Joe has all of a sudden come into a deal of money. Long story short, Vito gets put in jail again, and 4 years later his friend Leo Galante arranges for Vito to get out early. Vito then goes on to join the Falcone crime family and begins his life as a mobster. And that's where Mafia 2 gets really interesting. In the life of a mafioso, Vito must kill someone without question if told to, and that's what gives the story a very unique feel. So throw in some car chases, gunfights, stealth, assassinations, women, and a collection of Playboy magazines, and you have Mafia 2. The entire campaign of Mafia 2 is about 10 to 12 hours long, depending on if you go to your objectives immediately or if you explore the environment. And speaking of the environment, Mafia 2 is a beautiful game. Empire Bay is a great combination of American cities, especially Chicago and New York, and you really felt like you were in the 40s and 50s. The great way the developers differentiated the decades was that in the 40s it was wintertime, dark, gray, and lifeless, and in the 50s it was summer, bright, sunny, and wild. The cars in this game are also very authentic, and the driving is very realistic and satisfying. You have an array of guns at your disposal, including the well-renowned Tommy gun that is known throughout all the Mafia movies. As you progress through Vito's story, you will encounter some very interesting characters. An example of that being an ex-war veteran selling you the best equipment that you can't get from anyone else, or a scrapyard owner who pays you to crush cars, or even an old man who sells you bootleg documents, rigged guns, and lockpicks. The story has many plot twists, which always keeps you wanting more. So now I have to talk to you about the negatives of Mafia 2. Empire Bay may be beautiful, but it's also very large. Because of this, you'll spend most of the game driving from mission to mission, or even just to go home to advance to one of the next of 15 chapters. The reason this didn't bother me too much was because you had a phenomenal soundtrack compiled of 40s and 50s jazz and rock and roll. There were some other minor issues with the AI, but other than that, Mafia 2 was a pretty solid game all around. However, the one thing I absolutely hated about Mafia 2, and it seems to happen more often with games today, was that the ending was extremely anticlimactic. Now, I'm not going to give away too much of the ending, but basically the gist of it is you kill a guy, meet up with friends, and then your best friend gets abandoned. And the reason I had a problem with that was throughout the entire game, you had so much action building up to this moment. And then when you reach the final level, it's not challenging, the guy you have to kill doesn't even have a weapon, his guards are complete morons, and all you do is kill him and drive off to a strip club. So my final verdict of Mafia 2 is that besides those 2 or 3 gripes, I had an awesome time playing this game. So because of that, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I would recommend that you rent the game because there isn't too much replayability to it besides finding 50 Playboy magazines and 160 wanted posters.
Like the fella once said, ain't that a kickin'?